I just want to see my balance, she whispered, trembling as the bank manager laughed in her face. But no one could have expected what happened next. What he saw on the screen would shatter everything they thought they knew about her and change her life forever. This is the story of Amira Brooks, a young woman pushed to the streets, betrayed by those she trusted, and about to uncover a secret her mother kept hidden for decades. Hey, before we dive in, I'd love to hear from you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I want to feel connected with all of you, from every corner of the world, sharing this story together. The doors of Hartford Federal Bank slid open with a metallic sigh as Amira Soline Brooks, 24 years old, stepped inside. Her coat was ripped at the sleeves, the fabric tired from nights spent on sidewalks and bus stops. The cold of the morning still clung to her skin. People in line turned, eyes narrowing, their judgment silent but sharp enough to cut. Amira kept her head down, fingers trembling inside the pockets of her faded jeans. She had rehearsed her sentence all night, whispering it into the darkness until her throat hurt. Now she stood there, trying to hold the pieces of her courage together. A teller at the nearest counter nudged the coworker beside him and smirked. "We got another one," he whispered, not quietly enough. A few customers chuckled. Amira swallowed hard and stepped forward when the line moved. She didn't flinch when someone shifted away from her, as though the air around her was dirty. She didn't look up when a woman pulled her purse closer. She had learned to live inside silence, to carry her dignity quietly. When her turn came, she walked to the front desk where a young banker named Riley Grant sat tapping loudly on his keyboard. He didn't even greet her, just glanced at her clothes, then rolled his chair back a few inches like she carried disease. Amira lifted her chin a little, just enough to keep from shaking. I want to see my balance," she said softly. Riley raised an eyebrow, then burst into a short laugh. "Your balance? For what account?" he asked, almost playfully mocking her. Amira slid a wrinkled document across the desk. The only clean thing she owned. The letter she had found. The one that told her she had an account. Something she still wasn't sure she believed. Riley barely looked at it before rolling his eyes. "Ma'am, this is obviously a misunderstanding. I mean seriously." Before he could finish, the branch manager, a tall man named Harold Kemp, walked by. He paused when he saw the paper in Riley's hand. "What's that?" he asked. Riley shrugged. "Some random account letter. Probably fake." Harold took the document, scanned it once, then twice, and his expression shifted. "Put her information in," he instructed. Riley sighed but did it anyway, typing half-heartedly. The computer loaded, then froze, then flashed something across the screen that made Riley's smirk collapse instantly. Harold leaned forward. His eyes widened. His breathing hitched. For the first time since she stepped inside, the bank fell silent, like everyone could sense something shifting. Amira stood there, hands clasped tightly, waiting for the humiliation she was sure would follow. But instead, Harold's face went pale. He stared at the monitor like he was staring at a ghost. "Ma'am," he whispered, voice shaking. This can't be right." Amira's heartbeat stuttered. "What does it say?" Harold swallowed hard, unable to look away from the glowing numbers on the screen. Then, in a trembling voice, he said, "Miss Brooks, your account balance is its." The power flickered. The screen went black. People gasped, and Harold stumbled back like he had just seen something terrifying. If Amira's story moved you so far, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves emotional, real-life stories. Your support helps us bring more powerful tales like this to life. Years before the bank lights flickered and fear crossed a manager's face, Amira Brooks was a bright 16-year-old sitting in the back row of Easton Ridge High School, scribbling equations in the margins of her notebook. Back then, her clothes were still secondhand, but her eyes held a glow that made teachers pause. She solved math problems faster than most adults. She built small machines out of scrap metal, tiny spinning fans, and whirring little motors that amazed her classmates. But every afternoon, when the final bell rang, that bright world dimmed. Amira didn't go home to the soft warmth of a family living room. She went to whatever foster house was assigned that month. Some homes were quiet. Some were crowded. Some were cold in ways that had nothing to do with temperature. Most foster parents tolerated her presence the way someone tolerates a dripping faucet, annoyed, waiting for someone else to fix it. Still, Amira carried her dreams like armor. She told anyone who would listen, "I want to be an engineer." She said it with a confidence she borrowed from the stars she watched at night through cracked bedroom windows. She believed she could build something better for herself, for the world, for anyone who had ever felt small. One person who seemed to believe in her was Mrs. Carlington, a guidance counselor with perfectly curled hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. She often told Amira to aim high, to push forward, to make the system proud. She praised Amira's grades. She encouraged her to apply for the Silver Path Scholarship, one of the biggest awards in the state. For months, Amira worked on essays, filled forms, gathered recommendation letters. She stayed late in the school library long after the janitors were sweeping the halls. Her engineering teacher, Mr. Lowell, promised that this scholarship would change everything. And when Amira finally submitted her application, she allowed herself to hope. A real kind of hope, the kind that warms the chest, the kind that makes life feel possible. But what Amira didn't know, what no one knew, was that Mrs. Carlington had been quietly guiding the scholarship committee's decisions for years. And while she liked Amira's brilliance, she didn't like her background. A foster kid with no stable foundation, as she called it. In her eyes, scholarships were meant for students who represented the school well, not someone who moved from house to house, someone who didn't have parents to attend award nights or pose for smiling pictures. So, without a second thought, she altered a few lines in Amira's file. A phrase changed here. A behavior concern added there. One missing recommendation letter she never forwarded. No one questioned her. She'd been doing this job for years. A week later, Amira walked home from school humming, carrying a small bag of parts she planned to turn into a tiny solar-powered fan. She felt light, lighter than she had in months. She even smiled at the orange sky. At the foster house doorstep, she noticed an envelope taped to the door, her name written neatly in blue ink. She thought it was the scholarship decision. Her hand trembled with excitement as she tore it open. The words inside sliced through her like winter wind. "Your scholarship has been revoked." Her breath froze. The world tilted, and the letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the ground like something dying. After losing the scholarship that should have lifted her out of the foster system, Amira Brooks refused to let her hope die. She worked harder, studied later, and saved every dollar she could. By 18, she aged out of foster care and moved into a small, worn-down apartment with Davina Holt, a childhood friend she had known since middle school. Davina was loud, funny, dramatic, an easy person to trust, or so Amira believed. Their place was tiny, with peeling wallpaper and a single sagging couch, but to Amira, it felt like freedom. It was the first home she lived in where she didn't have to ask permission before opening the refrigerator. She felt safe enough to breathe. She cooked cheap meals in dented pots, studied at the shaky kitchen table, and taped her engineering sketches to the walls. Davina would watch her sometimes with narrowed eyes, though Amira never noticed. At first, Davina was proud to tell people she lived with the smart one. "Amira's like a human calculator," she'd brag. But as months passed, the bragging turned into subtle resentment. Whenever Amira came home with books or new ideas for inventions, Davina rolled her eyes a little harder. She started making jokes, sharp ones, about Miss Genius and Little Miss Perfect. Still, Amira trusted her. They had history. They shared the same survival stories, the same struggles. She believed Davina understood her heart more than anyone ever had. To keep up with rent, Amira worked 3 jobs: waitress during the day, grocery bagger in the afternoons, and janitor at a small office building at night. She barely slept. Her feet always hurt. Yet she felt proud every time she placed money into the metal lockbox she kept hidden under her bed. Dollar by dollar, she was building her future. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before sunrise, she would sit at the kitchen window, watching the city wake up. She sipped the cheapest coffee she could find, letting the steam warm her face. Those mornings felt peaceful, almost sacred. She would whisper to herself, "One day I'm going to build something big. One day I'm going to make it." Davina, however, saw the growing stack of Amira's savings and felt something entirely different. Jealousy crept under her skin like poison. She struggled to keep jobs, spent money fast, and blamed the world for the weight of her problems. Amira's discipline and hope were constant reminders of everything Davina wasn't. The tension between them grew quietly, almost invisibly. A sarcastic comment here. A cold stare there. But Amira always forgave quickly. She needed to believe Davina was still her friend, the only one she had. One evening, after a 14-hour day split across all 3 jobs, Amira dragged herself into the apartment, dreaming of sleep. But the living room light was on, and the door to her bedroom was slightly open. Her heart tightened. She walked inside. The bed was shifted. The floor scuffed. Her lockbox gone. Panic shot through her. She checked the closet, the drawers, the bathroom. She called out Davina's name, voice trembling. No answer. On the kitchen table lay a single note. 5 words. Slanted handwriting. Rushed. I needed it. Don't call me. The apartment door stood wide open, and Davina was gone, along with every dollar Amira had ever saved. After Davina vanished with every hard-earned penny, Amira Brooks felt the city close in on her like a cage. She had no savings, no friend, no family, just her worn coat and the fierce determination that had kept her alive this long. Desperate, she found work at Millstone Diner, a small, bustling eatery tucked into a corner of downtown Easton Ridge. The diner smelled of fried eggs and coffee, of oil and warmth. Amira's first day, she scrubbed counters until her hands bled, cleaned floors until her knees ached, and memorized the menu in minutes. Despite the long hours, she found something comforting in the rhythm. Taking orders, balancing plates, smiling for tips. Slowly, she became part of the diner's pulse. Customers started to notice her. Mr. Henderson, a retired teacher who came every morning for black coffee and a bacon omelet, praised her attentiveness. Teenagers at the counter chuckled when she playfully corrected their orders. A mother whispered, "She's got a bright soul, that one," when her daughter spilled milk. For the first time in months, Amira felt seen, even appreciated. But not everyone saw her that way. Manager Carl Whitman, a stern man in his 40s, seemed to carry a permanent scowl whenever he looked at her. He'd often assign her the dirtiest tables or the closing shifts no one else wanted. He whispered to other staff that she didn't quite fit the image of the diner, and Amira knew it had nothing to do with her work ethic. She was black. She was different. She had survived life in ways no one else could imagine, and somehow, that made her a target. Still, Amira held on. Small kindnesses reminded her she could keep going. One afternoon, Mrs. Gladys, a sweet elderly woman who came in for soup and tea, sat down at her favorite booth. She reached across the counter, took Amira's hand, and said gently, "Don't let the world make you small, child. You've got fire in you. Don't ever let them take it away." Amira felt tears prick her eyes. For a brief moment, the weight on her shoulders lightened. She whispered a quiet, "Thank you," and promised herself she wouldn't give up, no matter what. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. Late one Friday night, when the diner was nearly empty and Amira had just finished counting the register, Carl Whitman stormed out of the office. His face was red, eyes narrowing. "Amira," he barked. "Stop right there." Confused, she turned. "The money, it's missing," he shouted. "I counted before you started. Where's the cash? You've been skimming, haven't you?" Amira froze. Her stomach dropped. She opened her mouth, trying to explain, but no words came. Other staff gathered, eyes wide. Customers peeked over menus, sensing the drama. She shook her head frantically. I didn't." Carl slammed a hand on the counter, leaning close, his face inches from hers. "You? Out. You're done." Amira's heart pounded. Fear and disbelief tangled in her chest. The small sense of safety she'd felt here shattered. And in that instant, as the diner's neon lights flickered above, she realized she was being falsely accused and had nowhere to run. That night, Amira Brooks walked out of Millstone Diner carrying nothing but her apron and the weight of disbelief. Her hands still smelled of grease, but worse was the taste of betrayal in her mouth. She had been fired without evidence, accused of a crime she didn't commit. Her co-workers avoided her eyes, pretending not to see the tears threatening to spill. Carl Whitman had made sure the rumor followed her out the door, and the cold wind of Easton Ridge seemed to mock her. By the time she reached her apartment building, the letter on the door confirmed her deepest fears. The rent was overdue. The landlord had posted eviction notices the day before. She had no savings, no backup plan, and nowhere else to go. The tiny apartment that had once felt like a safe harbor was now locked, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Amira wandered the streets, clutching the small backpack that contained her life. a few clothes, her worn coat, and the most precious item of all, a small notebook, its pages frayed and stained. Inside, she had written every dream she'd ever had: equations for machines, sketches of inventions, lists of scholarships she would someday earn, places she wanted to see, and the life she imagined for herself. Sitting on the curb, she flipped through the notebook, letting her fingers trace the familiar lines. She whispered to herself, "I still have this. I still have me." For a few minutes, the notebook was a shield. The words reminded her of the girl who refused to be broken, the girl who believed in light even when the world tried to snuff it out. The night was quiet at first, the hum of streetlights above and the distant rumble of traffic. Amira leaned against a lamppost, hugging her backpack close, willing herself to stay awake, to stay strong. She imagined a future where she wasn't judged by clothes or color, where her hard work was enough to carry her to something better. But the calm didn't last. By midnight, clouds had rolled in, thick and gray, pressing low against the city. The wind picked up, whipping around corners and through empty alleyways. Rain began to fall in hard, cold sheets, soaking through her coat and chilling her to the bone. She tried to find shelter under a bus stop awning, but the wind pushed the water sideways, drenching her hair and soaking her jeans. She hugged her notebook to her chest, shivering uncontrollably. Passers-by rushed past without a glance, and the city seemed enormous, indifferent, and merciless. Every flash of lightning made her flinch. Every distant crack of thunder made her heart jump. There was no place left for her. Every apartment, every doorway, every potential corner seemed either locked or already occupied. Her shoes were wet, her teeth chattered, and the rain soaked her bag until the edges of her notebook began to curl. Amira looked up at the dark, stormy sky and whispered, barely audibly, I just need to survive tonight." And as the first bolt of lightning split the sky above Easton Ridge, she realized the harsh truth. She was alone, soaked, and about to spend her first night fully exposed to the storm, with nothing but the pavement beneath her. The rain hadn't let up when Amira Brooks dragged herself behind the back alley of a shuttered corner store, shivering and soaked to the bone. The neon closed sign flickered overhead, throwing jagged shadows across the wet pavement. She pressed herself against the brick wall, knees pulled to her chest, and tried to make herself as small as possible. Every drop of rain felt like needles against her skin, every gust of wind like a slap from the world she could never outrun. Her stomach growled, a hollow, bitter sound that echoed off the alley walls. She hadn't eaten since the diner, and even then it had been scraps from the back table. Hunger twisted in her gut. She hugged her notebook close, as if the thin pages could protect her from the cold and the night. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy, slow, deliberate. Amira's heart leapt into her throat. She had learned, the hard way, that strangers at night were rarely friendly. She pressed herself closer to the wall, trying to make herself invisible. The shadow of a man fell across the alley. "You okay?" A voice asked, rough but not threatening. Amira flinched, but didn't respond. The man knelt a few feet away, careful not to get too close. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a small paper bag. He handed it toward her. "Eat. You'll feel better," he said simply. Amira blinked. She hesitated. The world had taught her caution, but hunger was a stronger teacher tonight. Slowly, she reached for the bag and pulled out a warm sandwich, wrapped in wax paper. Steam curled from it, and the smell of roasted chicken and melted cheese made her mouth water. She sank to the wet pavement and took a bite. The warmth spread through her, and for a few minutes, the storm seemed less cruel. She chewed slowly, savoring the gift, trying to memorize the comfort she felt for just a heartbeat. I don't," she began, but when she looked up, the man was gone. No footprints in the wet alley. No sound of running. Only the soft tapping of rain against bricks and asphalt. Her heart pounded, half in gratitude, half in fear. Who was he? Why had he appeared and disappeared so suddenly, like a shadow? Amira tucked the empty wax paper back into her bag, the strange kindness warming her more than the sandwich. She wanted to follow him, to thank him, to ask why, but the alley stretched empty in both directions, swallowed by the storm. Shivering again, she rose and began to walk toward the main street, hoping for some semblance of shelter. Her fingers brushed against something sticking out from a puddle near the dumpster. Curious, She bent down and pulled it free. It was a plain, thick envelope, soaked at the edges but intact. Her name, Amira Brooks, was scrawled across the front in ink so dark it almost seemed to glow in the dim light. Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at it, fingers trembling. No return address. No hint of who had left it. A sense of both dread and intrigue surged through her. The notebook pressed against her chest suddenly felt heavier. She slipped the envelope carefully into her coat, heart racing. Somewhere beyond the alley, the storm raged on, but Amira couldn't tear her eyes away from the envelope. And in that moment, she knew this was no ordinary letter. It was the beginning of something that would change everything. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by morning, but Amira Brooks still trembled as she unfolded the thick envelope she had found in the alley. The paper inside smelled faintly of ink and old wood, like it had been waiting for her for a long time. The letterhead read, Harrison and Locke, attorneys at law, though neither name rang any bells. Her fingers shook as she held it, unsure whether to hope or brace herself. She sat at a corner table in Easton Ridge Public Library, surrounded by the faint hum of printers and whispers of students studying. The library felt safer than the streets, warmer and quiet enough for her to breathe. Amira pulled her notebook close and laid the letter on top, tracing the bold black letters with her finger. The letter was formal, almost cold, but the words made her pulse quicken. Ms. Amira Brooks, it began. This correspondence is to notify you of a trust account opened in your name on June 12, 2002, at Hartford Federal Bank. The account has been held under your name for the entirety of your legal life and has accrued funds through transfers and securities as stipulated by the grantor. Access is now available to you, should you choose to do so. Amira's mouth went dry. She reread the lines, her eyes darting over the words as though the more she read, the more real it might become. A trust account? In my name? For years? Her chest tightened. She felt the warmth of the library, the hum of life around her, and for the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope sparked inside. She paused and took a deep breath, closing her eyes. The notebook in her lap suddenly felt heavier, more precious, a reminder of every plan, every dream she had nurtured in secret. Maybe this could be the chance to rebuild. Amira read on, scanning for details. Please note, the letter continued. Any inquiries regarding the account must be directed through this office. Unauthorized access is prohibited. For verification, additional documents have been enclosed. She flipped the letter over, finding a small, folded sheet with numbers and what looked like a signature stamp. It was official, undeniably real. Her pulse raced. 1,000 questions stormed her mind. Who had opened the account? Why? And why had she never been told? Then she saw it, nearly at the bottom of the page, in a single italicized line. This account has been established by your biological mother, whose identity remains confidential until verification. Amira froze. Her fingers tightened around the letter. Her biological mother? The woman she had spent years imagining in stolen memories, a woman she had never met but dreamed about every night? Her throat tightened as her heart began to hammer. The weight of this revelation pressed down on her. Everything she thought she knew about her life, the betrayals, the lost scholarships, the empty apartments, the stolen savings, was suddenly connected to someone she had never met. Someone who had left behind this hidden lifeline. Her hands shook so badly that she dropped the letter onto the table. It flopped open, revealing the numbers, the account information, and the name of a woman she barely recognized from a faded memory. Amira's breath hitched. She pressed her palm against her chest. The library, the quiet, the soft lamplight, everything disappeared around her. She whispered, almost to herself, "My mother. She's still out there?" And at that moment, a new, terrifying possibility struck her. Whatever had been left for her, hidden all these years, could also come with dangers she had never imagined. The letter weighed heavily in Amira Brooks' bag as she wandered through the streets of Easton Ridge, mind racing with questions she had no answers to. She needed the truth. She had to know who her mother was, why she had disappeared, and why an entire account had been secretly built in her name. She started at the community center she had visited as a child, places where social workers still remembered her small face, her bright eyes, and the stubborn determination that never left her. At the first center, she sifted through dusty files, and old photographs. The clerks were hesitant, glancing at her coat and worn shoes, but eventually one woman, Mrs. Callahan, handed her a thin folder. "You were a remarkable kid," she said softly. "Always asking questions, always trying to fix things. But your mother, she was so young, scared, and heartbroken." Amira clutched the folder tightly. She scanned old case notes, trying to piece together the fragments of a life she barely remembered. She visited old foster homes, knocking on doors and showing pictures of herself as a child. Most of the former foster parents had moved or passed away, but a few remembered. One older woman, Mrs. Hargrove, invited Amira in. The house smelled faintly of baked bread and lavender. She sat Amira down at the kitchen table and studied her face, tears brimming in her eyes. "Your mother, she held you like the world depended on it," she said. "When she left you, she cried for hours. I'd never seen a woman cry like that before. She begged us to keep you safe. She said she hoped one day you'd understand." Amira's throat tightened. For a moment, all the lost years, the cold streets, the stolen savings, the evictions, the false accusations, felt connected to this woman she had never met. She traced a finger over the worn table, imagining a tiny baby version of herself cradled in her mother's arms. The calm warmth of that memory gave her a flicker of hope. But as she prepared to leave, Mrs. Hargrove hesitated. "There's something else," she whispered. "After you left, I heard whispers that your mother never really disappeared, that she went somewhere she thought was safe. She may still be alive." Amira froze, her heart hammering in her chest. Every step she had taken, every danger she had survived, every cold night on the streets, all of it suddenly seemed small compared to this revelation. Her mother alive? After all these years? Her mind raced with questions. Why had she left her? Why had she hidden the account? Why now? And most importantly, where was she? Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old windows. Amira clutched her notebook and the folder, as though holding on to the past might guide her to the future. She knew she couldn't stop now. She had to keep searching, follow every lead, no matter how small or dangerous. And then, a chilling thought struck her. If her mother was alive, someone else might be looking for her too. Someone who didn't want her found. Amira stepped back into the streets, rain beginning to fall lightly once again, and whispered to herself, "I have to find her before it's too late." Her hands shook as she realized. The woman who had once cradled her, the woman who had cried for her, may still be alive, and someone might be hunting her. Amira Brooks walked the streets of Easton Ridge like a shadow, her soaked coat clinging to her thin frame, her notebook tucked tightly under her arm. She had chased every lead about her mother for days, visiting abandoned apartments, old community centers, and social workers who shrugged when she arrived. The city seemed indifferent to her struggle, its streets echoing with the harshness of the world she couldn't yet escape. That afternoon, as she passed a corner near the train tracks, a group of teenagers sitting on a low brick wall spotted her. They were loud, brash, and cruel. One pointed a finger at her, laughing. "Look at her. She thinks she belongs anywhere." Another sneered. The tallest of them tossed a half-empty soda can at her feet. Amira kept walking, her jaw tight, telling herself not to respond. She had learned that arguing never helped. Survival depended on keeping your head low, even when the world mocked you. But the taunts echoed in her ears, gnawing at the fragile hope she had built over the past few weeks. Desperate, she tried to flag down a nearby policeman. "Excuse me, sir," she said, voice quivering. "I'm looking for records about my mother. Can you help me?" The officer barely glanced at her, his eyes flicking over her torn coat, dirt-streaked hair, and tired face. "Kid, this isn't our problem," he muttered, walking away without another word. Amira's chest tightened. The city that held so many stories of hope seemed determined to ignore hers. As she wandered, she noticed a small figure huddled behind a dumpster. A girl, no older than 12, shivering and holding a thin blanket. Amira knelt beside her. "Hey, it's okay," she whispered softly. "You're not alone." The girl looked up, eyes wide, scared, and nodded, leaning against her for comfort. Amira shared some of her dry bread, offered a comforting smile, and for a brief moment, the chaos of her life faded. She realized that even in her darkest hour, she could offer someone else a sliver of warmth, a fraction of hope. It reminded her why she kept searching, why she had survived every betrayal and every storm. But the calm didn't last long. Across the street, a teen held up his phone, laughing loudly. He had recorded her helping the girl. The screen showed her soaked, trembling, holding the small girl in the cold alley. "Yo, check this out," he shouted, sending it to his friends. Within seconds, more teens gathered, laughing, pointing, and filming. Amira froze. Her face burned with humiliation, her voice caught in her throat. By the time she realized what was happening, the video had already started spreading online. Within minutes, notifications pinged relentlessly, strangers mocking her, cruel comments about her appearance, her homelessness, her desperation. The brief moment of kindness she had shared felt twisted, warped into entertainment for people who didn't care. Amira's hands shook as she clutched her notebook and the girl's small shoulder. The world felt enormous, cruel, and unstoppable. Her chest heaved with a mix of anger, fear, and helplessness as she realized someone had captured her pain, turned it into a joke, and shared it with thousands of strangers, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. By morning, Amira Brooks's face was everywhere. The video from the alley had gone viral, shared across social media with cruel captions, "Homeless girl crying in the rain," and "Loser life goals." Her chest tightened every time she heard a notification ping. Strangers on the internet mocked her voice, her coat, her notebook. Comments poured in, strangers judging every detail of her life she couldn't control. Walking down the streets of Easton Ridge felt like navigating a battlefield. People stared at her, whispered, or pulled their children closer. A group of teens outside a convenience store laughed, pointing at her and reenacting the video. Amira held her notebook tighter, shoving it into her bag like it could shield her from the world. Every step made her stomach knot with fear and humiliation. She ducked into a small cafe to escape the stares and the echoes of cruel laughter. The scent of coffee and baked bread was a fragile comfort. The barista, a young man with soft eyes named Eli, smiled warmly as she approached. "On the house," he said, placing a steaming cup of tea in front of her without asking. "You look like you need it." Amira's hands shook as she accepted it. She took a slow sip, feeling warmth seep into her fingers, her chest, her soul. For a brief moment, the world felt human again. Someone saw her without judgment. Someone cared enough to offer kindness without asking anything in return. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine a future where she wasn't always running, always hiding, always mocked. She stayed in the cafe for a while, sketching her thoughts in her notebook, letting the soft hum of conversation and the clatter of cups ease her tension. But she knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. The search for her mother still weighed heavily on her, and she had to keep moving. As she left, clutching her notebook and trying to hold her head high, the door chimed behind her. She froze. Amira Brooks, a sharp, furious voice screamed. Her head snapped up. Across the small grocery store near the cafe, a woman's eyes were wide with recognition. She pointed a finger directly at Amira, her face twisted in anger. "It's you. You're the girl from the video." Amira's stomach dropped. The store felt smaller, closing in around her. Other shoppers turned, whispers spreading like wildfire. Her heart hammered in her chest. The woman stormed toward her, shouting at the top of her lungs. People stopped what they were doing to watch the scene unfold. Amira's face burned with shame and panic. She tried to explain, voice barely audible over the commotion. I'm not." But the woman wouldn't listen. She kept yelling, pointing, accusing, drawing attention to Amira like she was a spectacle, a target. Amira stumbled backward, her notebook clutched tightly, trying to escape the sudden spotlight of public ridicule. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that the video wasn't just online. It had followed her into the real world, turning her life into a public humiliation she couldn't hide from. And as the woman's voice pierced the store, louder and more furious with each step, Amira knew her life had just become infinitely more dangerous, and the world was watching. The rain had started again when Amira Brooks reached the address on the envelope. Harrison and Locke, attorneys at law. Her hands shook, clutching the small notebook and the crumpled letter from the alley. She pushed open the office door, hoping for answers, a way to finally understand the mysterious trust account and the mother she had never known. Inside, dust hung thick in the air. Chairs were overturned, papers scattered. A faded closed sign leaned against the reception desk. Her heart sank. The office had been permanently shut, its doors abandoned like so many of the unanswered questions in her life. Amira stepped carefully, her shoes clicking against the cracked tile floor. She ran her fingers along a counter, finding dust and grime, but no warmth. "No one here," she whispered, more to herself than to the empty office. "No one can tell me anything now." Her gaze fell to the floor, where a manila folder had slipped from a filing cabinet, half hidden under a chair. She bent down, hands trembling, and picked it up. The folder was worn, water-stained, and smelled faintly of old paper and ink. She opened it slowly, careful not to tear the fragile pages inside. Inside were documents, legal forms, signatures, and correspondence, everything that seemed connected to the account mentioned in the alley letter. Her pulse quickened as she flipped through the papers, scanning the dense text. Each line was a bridge to a past she had barely touched, a past her mother had tried to protect, perhaps even from her own daughter. A calm moment washed over her, almost surreal in the abandoned office. For the first time in weeks, Amira felt close to answers, a thread of hope she could hold on to. She whispered softly, "This is it. This has to be it." She studied each document carefully, piecing together dates, signatures, and bank references, trying to make sense of the decades of secrecy. Then she found it, a single sheet tucked at the very end. Her eyes widened as she scanned the text. It listed a name she had never fully known, Serafina Latham. Her mother. Every fear, every longing, every question she had carried her entire life began to crystallize into one harsh, astonishing truth. Beneath her mother's name was another revelation, a trust fund, substantial enough to change her life completely. The funds were secured in her name, accessible only through proper verification, and tied directly to her mother's estate. Amira's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the folder. The world seemed to tilt around her. For years, she had been homeless, betrayed, mocked, and abandoned. Yet here, in this forgotten, dust-filled office, she held proof that her mother had planned something for her. Something real, something valuable. Her chest tightened as questions collided with hope. Why had her mother left her? Why had no one told her? And if this trust fund was meant for her, why had it been hidden for so long? Amira pressed the folder to her chest, heart pounding, tears threatening to fall. She knew she had stumbled onto the most crucial piece of her life, a secret buried for decades. Then she saw it, a signature stamped and dated decades ago, and beneath it, a note in her mother's handwriting. "For Amira, when she is ready." Her breath caught, and at that moment, the weight of the world pressed down, because the documents not only revealed her mother's name, they also hinted at a fortune that powerful, dangerous people might want to claim before she ever could. Amira Brooks sat on a worn bench outside the shelter, clutching the folder from the abandoned law office. Her chest ached with a mixture of fear, hope, and disbelief. She had stared at the documents for hours, tracing her mother's name over and over, but still, a nagging doubt lingered. What if it's a scam? What if someone is setting me up? Her fingers absent-mindedly flipped through the pages as she thought about her next step. The folder said the account was at Hartford Federal Bank, the very same place she had been mocked, laughed at, and she remembered the stormy nights, humiliated. Her stomach twisted at the thought. Yet, the trust fund might be the key to everything, a chance to survive, to reclaim her life, to finally escape the streets. Alone in the small shelter room, Amira practiced in front of a cracked mirror. Her voice was low at first, trembling, but she repeated it, over and over. "I just want to see my balance." She straightened her shoulders, squared her jaw, and imagined a calm confidence she didn't yet feel. Each repetition bolstered her courage. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. I have to do this." The shelter was quiet except for soft chatter and the clatter of dishes from the volunteer kitchen. Marian, a kind woman with graying hair and warm eyes, noticed Amira's preoccupied expression. She handed her a neatly folded coat. "Here," Marian said gently. "It's clean. You'll feel better facing the world in this. Sometimes little things can make a big difference." Amira accepted it with a nod, wrapping herself in the warmth. The soft fabric against her skin reminded her of all the small gestures of kindness that had kept her alive. Mrs. Gladys with soup, Eli with tea, the mysterious man in the alley with the sandwich. She breathed deeply and let herself believe, for a moment, that maybe this world wasn't entirely cruel. By late afternoon, she left the shelter, the folder clutched tightly under her arm and her notebook pressed against her chest. The sky was gray, the wind biting, but the clean coat was a shield, a promise she could face what was coming. She walked the familiar streets toward Hartford Federal Bank, each step heavier than the last, her mind filled with memories of mockery and shame, but also of hope. When she finally arrived, the automatic doors whooshed open, and she froze. The bank lobby was filled with activity, but the moment the staff saw her, everything changed. Teller eyes widened. Managers whispered urgently to each other. Security guards shifted in their seats, eyes locking on her, as if she were a person they hadn't expected to see. Amira's stomach lurched. Every step forward felt like walking into a spotlight of scrutiny. She gripped her folder tightly and tried to steady her breath. The words she had practiced hung in her throat. And then, a murmur ran through the lobby, spreading faster than lightning. It's her. The staff stared at her, some with disbelief, some with suspicion, some with a flicker of fear, and Amira realized, with a chilling certainty, that this visit to Hartford Federal Bank would change everything. Amira Brooks stepped further into the Hartford Federal Bank lobby, her heart hammering like a drum in her chest. Customers froze mid-step, turning their heads to stare at the soaked, worn young woman clutching a folder and a small notebook. Whispers ricocheted off the marble floors, voices dripping with judgment. Who is she? Why is she here? Homeless, I bet. Each word felt like a pinprick, stabbing at the fragile courage she had built over the past weeks. She made her way to the line of tellers, her clean coat doing little to mask the signs of her long nights on the streets. When it was finally her turn, she faced a young teller with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, tilting his head as he scanned her from head to toe. I just want to see my balance," Amira said quietly, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. The teller laughed, a short, sharp sound that made her stomach twist. "Balance? You? Homeless people don't have accounts," he said, gesturing toward her coat, her worn shoes, her soaked hair. The words were cruel and deliberate, designed to humiliate. Customers glanced over, some smirking, others whispering under their breath. Amira's chest burned, but she forced herself to remain calm. She folded her hands over her folder and nodded politely. "I just want to verify the information. I have documents here." The teller scoffed and muttered under his breath as he turned to the computer, clearly unconvinced. Amira stepped back slightly, letting the people in line move ahead, taking a deep breath to steady herself. For a moment, she focused on the quiet rhythm of her breathing, the faint hum of the air vents, the way her notebook pressed against her heart. She told herself she had survived storms far worse than this. Hours, in her mind, felt like minutes. She waited with quiet dignity, each polite nod and patient step strengthening the fragile flame of her courage. She recalled the alley, the stranger with the sandwich, the elderly women who had shown her kindness, and the warmth of the barista's tea. Those memories bolstered her resolve. Then, from the office at the back of the lobby, a tall man in a crisp suit emerged, the branch manager. His eyes widened the moment they landed on her. Without a word, he motioned to a private desk, gesturing for her to follow. The chatter in the lobby hushed as if the air itself had paused. He reached for the computer, typing quickly, pulling up a series of files. Amira watched, her pulse steady but her breath shallow. Then he froze. His eyes went wide, his jaw slackened. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. Amira felt a shiver run down her spine. She had seen disbelief before, mockery, doubt, sneers, but this was different. His expression said something the teller and the whispering customers could not. He had just opened her account information, and whatever he saw made him stare as if the world itself had shifted under his feet. Amira's heart pounded. The calm patience she had practiced now clashed with the surge of adrenaline in her chest. She gripped her folder tighter, and in that frozen moment, she realized the numbers on the screen weren't just figures. They were the key to everything her life had ever promised, and the world had just noticed her in a way it could never ignore. The branch manager's eyes were glued to the screen, jaw tight, hands frozen over the keyboard. He leaned back, blinking rapidly, as if trying to convince himself that what he saw wasn't real. Amira Brooks stood across from him, her hands gripping the worn folder, heart hammering in her chest. Every second stretched unbearably, the soft hum of computers and distant footsteps in the lobby fading into silence. He leaned forward, squinting at the numbers. "No, that can't be right," he muttered, tapping the keys repeatedly. The digits on the screen reflected a balance that seemed impossible. Millions transferred over years, quietly accruing interest, untouched, reserved in her name. Every figure glinted like a promise she had never allowed herself to dream about. Amira pressed her eyes closed for a long moment. Her body trembled. The world felt fragile, the way a thin sheet of ice feels before it cracks. She was afraid to hope, afraid that if she opened her eyes, everything would vanish. The folder, the numbers, the proof of a life she had never known. She let herself breathe slowly, telling herself that she had survived storms far worse than this, storms that had left her cold, wet, and hungry. She had endured every humiliation, every betrayal, every night on the streets. Surely she could endure this moment, too. When she dared to open her eyes, the manager was still staring. His expression had shifted from disbelief to something more intense. Curiosity, urgency, fear, and awe tangled together in a knot she couldn't decipher. He scrolled through her account history, eyes darting over transaction after transaction, large sums arriving from unknown sources, carefully logged, all linked to a name she had just begun to understand. Her mother, Serafina Latham. The realization was staggering. The mother who had given her away, the mother she had spent her life imagining, had not only survived but had secured a future for her daughter, hidden and protected for decades. Amira's chest tightened with a mix of sorrow and wonder. Every hardship she had endured, the evictions, the stolen savings, the ridicule, the nights on the streets, suddenly felt like a prelude to this moment. A cruel, necessary preparation for the truth she now faced. The manager shook his head, as if trying to deny the numbers, but the screen was relentless. Every digit confirmed it. Millions. Secure. Waiting. A life-changing fortune hidden in plain sight. Finally, he lifted his eyes from the screen and looked directly at her. His gaze was sharp, incredulous, almost accusatory. He leaned closer, voice low but intense, as if the walls themselves might overhear. "Who are you?" Amira froze. The question wasn't just about identity. It was a demand for her story, her proof, her very existence. The lobby seemed to shrink around her, the whispers of onlookers, the curious stares of tellers, all blending into one unbearable silence. Her hands tightened around the folder. Her mind raced. This was it. Everything she had suffered, everything she had endured, had led to this moment. And yet, she realized with a shiver that revealing who she truly was could change everything, and not necessarily in ways she could control. The manager hesitated, then reached behind the monitor and pulled out a small, folded envelope attached to the account file. Dust clung to the edges, and the paper felt heavy in Amira Brooks' hands. Her heart skipped a beat as she took it, brushing off the damp corners and holding it close. She found a quiet corner in the bank office, pressing the envelope to her chest. For a moment, she simply breathed, letting herself feel the warmth of paper in her trembling hands. The world outside, the whispers, the curious stares, the judgments, faded. In that moment, it was just her, the envelope, and the faint, indelible scent of ink and possibility. Slowly, she opened it. The paper inside was thick, folded neatly, and carefully written in a hand she recognized instantly from the documents at the abandoned law office. Serafina Latham, her mother. The words were deliberate, precise, yet brimming with emotion. "Amira, my dearest daughter," it began. Her mother's voice came alive in the loops of the handwriting, the pauses, the care in every word. She explained why she had disappeared, the fear that had driven her away, and the love that had never faltered. She wrote of nights spent crying alone, longing to hold her child, and of every decision made to ensure Amira's survival without ever revealing herself too soon. Amira's fingers traced the elegant script. Her throat tightened. She pressed the envelope to her lips, closing her eyes, letting herself absorb the magnitude of the words. For the first time, she felt connection, warmth, and understanding. The mother she had longed for had reached out across the years. Her mind softened as she imagined her mother writing each line by candlelight, afraid of being discovered, yet determined to leave behind a safety net. The calm moment enveloped her like a fragile sanctuary. She breathed slowly, letting herself hope. Perhaps this was the first step toward answers she had chased her whole life. Then her eyes fell on the final paragraph, and the warmth in her chest turned to ice. Amira, you must understand. There are people who would stop at nothing to claim what is yours. I have hidden your inheritance, your account, and your trail so that they cannot find you. One day, you may be hunted, and when that day comes, you must be ready. Trust no one completely, not even those who seem kind. My love is the only constant you can rely on. Amira's stomach dropped. Her hands shook as the paper trembled between her fingers. The thought that her mother had known, knew that people would come for her, that danger was waiting, made her pulse race. Every step she had taken, every small kindness she had cherished, could now be a trap. Her eyes darted to the manager, who watched her with a mixture of awe and worry, and then to the lobby beyond, where customers and tellers whispered behind their hands. Amira's lips pressed together as her pulse thundered. The calm she had felt moments ago vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and fear. And in that instant, she realized. Her mother's love had been protective, yes, but it also warned her of enemies she hadn't yet seen, of dangers closing in that could strike at any moment. Her fingers tightened around the note, and her heart hammered in a singular, terrifying thought. If her mother had known she would be hunted, then the moment to run, and to survive, had already begun. Amira Brooks's hands shook as she unfolded the second page of her mother's note. The ink had bled slightly along the folds, but the words were clear. Her mother wrote of threats, of shadowy figures who had followed her, of letters and calls filled with intimidation. Names were never given, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone powerful, someone dangerous, had tried to control her life and, by extension, Amira's. Amira swallowed hard, feeling a cold wash of fear slide down her spine. Every step she had taken since the alley, every street she had walked, every act of kindness she had accepted now felt fragile, like a thin thread over a chasm. Her mother had known, decades ago, that the world could be cruel, and that her daughter might be caught in its crossfire. For a moment, the terror eased as she read further. Her mother wrote with tenderness, weaving love into every line. Amira, I never stopped loving you, the words read. They shimmered like a beacon in the storm of her life. Amira pressed the note to her lips, closing her eyes, letting herself feel the warmth and connection she had longed for her entire life. That single sentence carried decades of regret, devotion, and hope. She let herself breathe, let herself imagine her mother nearby, whispering reassurance from some hidden distance. But as she folded the note carefully, trying to tuck it safely back into the folder, the calm shattered. A sharp alarm echoed through the bank, shrill and insistent, bouncing off the marble walls. Tellers froze mid-task, customers gasped, and the manager's face went pale. He lunged for the keyboard at his desk, fingers flying over keys. Someone has accessed the file remotely, he shouted, voice strained. His eyes darted between Amira and the monitor. Lines of code and alerts scrolled across the screen, confirming that her account and the secret trust fund were being viewed, perhaps manipulated, from somewhere outside the bank. Amira's pulse jumped. Her stomach tightened. She pressed her hands against her chest, feeling the rapid thrum of fear and adrenaline. Every instinct told her this wasn't a coincidence. Someone had been waiting, watching, tracking the very moment she discovered the account. The manager leaned closer, his voice low but urgent. Ms. Brooks, I don't know who this is, but they're in your file right now. They could withdraw funds, transfer everything. They could ruin this for you. Amira felt a chill creep over her. The calm she had clung to, the hope that had carried her to the bank, felt fragile and fleeting. She looked at the monitors, at the scrolling lines, and realized just how vulnerable she was. Every secret her mother had tried to protect was under immediate threat. Her mind raced. She could barely process the information, let alone plan a response. Every betrayal she had survived, every moment of hunger and fear, had prepared her for this, but nothing could have prepared her for a threat so immediate, so personal. The lobby buzzed with confusion and murmurs, but Amira's focus narrowed. Her folder, her notebook, the note from her mother, they were now lifelines. And whoever had accessed her file was already too close. Her fingers clenched the envelope, heart hammering. And in that instant, she understood the truth. Her mother's warning wasn't a distant memory. It was a battle that had already begun, and Amira was now at the center of it. The shrill alarm faded into the background, replaced by the thrum of tension in the bank. Amira Brooks clutched her folder and notebook, her mind racing with the knowledge that someone had accessed her account. She barely noticed the door to the bank swinging open, but then a familiar presence froze her blood. The man from the alley, the one who had given her a warm sandwich on a stormy night, stepped inside. His coat was dark, his face calm but intense, and his eyes immediately found hers. Amira's heart leapt. How? She wanted to speak, but words failed her. He moved closer, ignoring the whispers from the bank customers. Amira Brooks, he said quietly, his voice steady, almost soothing. I've been waiting for the right moment to find you. Her pulse quickened. She remembered the warmth of his gesture that night, the fleeting kindness that had seemed like a miracle. Now, standing before her, he carried an authority she hadn't expected. I work for your mother, he said, eyes locked on hers. I've protected her secrets, her plans, and now I protect you. Amira's knees felt weak. All the pieces clicked into place. The envelope, the trust account, the hidden note. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had planned, she had hidden, she had prepared. And this man had been watching, guiding, waiting for her to be ready. He handed her a bottle of water, small but deliberate, and spoke in a calm tone. You were always meant for more, Amira. Not the streets, not the mockery, not the stolen dreams. Your mother saw your potential long before the world noticed. She built a life for you in secret because she knew what you could become. For a fleeting moment, Amira allowed herself to breathe, to let hope seep into her chest. The world felt less hostile. She pictured her mother, tucked away somewhere, watching, caring, planning for this very day. She thought of all the kindness she had received, Eli's tea, Marion's coat, the sandwich in the alley, and felt a fragile thread of trust. But then the man's face darkened. His eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped to a low, urgent warning. Amira, listen to me very carefully. The people who chased your mother, they were never truly gone. They've been waiting, watching, and now they know you're alive. Amira's chest tightened, the warmth from hope instantly replaced by cold dread. Her heart raced as she processed the words. Whoever had forced her mother into hiding, whoever had threatened her life, was still out there, and now the hunter had a new target, her. Her fingers tightened around the folder. Her mother's note, the trust account, the carefully hidden inheritance, they were no longer simply treasures. They were a beacon, a lure for enemies who wouldn't hesitate to strike. The man leaned closer, his voice a whisper meant only for her. You can't stay here. Not for long. They'll come if they find this place. You need to be ready, mentally, physically, and strategically. Amira's mind spun. Every betrayal, every hardship, every moment of survival flashed before her eyes. She knew she couldn't run forever, but she also knew she couldn't ignore the warning. And as the tension thickened around them, the man's gaze locked on hers with unmistakable gravity. They know, he said. And if they get to you first, your mother's sacrifices, everything she built, will mean nothing. The sudden buzz of alarms filled the Hartford Federal Bank again, louder and sharper this time. Amira Brooks froze, clutching her folder as the bank manager hurried past, barking instructions to the tellers. The teller who had mocked her earlier stared at her with wide eyes, finally realizing the gravity of the situation. The stranger, the man from the alley, her mother's secret guardian, grabbed her arm gently but firmly. We don't have much time, he said, voice low and urgent. The system flagged unauthorized access. They'll trace you here. They'll try to find you before you even leave. Amira's heart raced. She had survived so much already, but now the world seemed to shrink around her, the shadows lengthening with every passing second. The manager ushered her into a small back office, locking the door behind them. Outside, the hum of panic from employees and whispers of customers created a tense soundtrack. The stranger pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket and placed it in her hands. This is a map to a safe house. Your mother had it prepared for emergencies like this. You'll be safe there for now. Amira's fingers trembled as she studied the map, tracing the streets and landmarks with her eyes. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt a spark of hope. This wasn't the end. She could survive. She could escape. She could reclaim her life. Her chest loosened as she allowed herself a moment of calm. Sitting back in the chair, the weight of exhaustion pressing on her, she whispered to herself, I deserve this. I deserve to be safe. I deserve a life that's more than this. The folder, the envelope, and the map felt like threads connecting her to a future she had never imagined. A life beyond hunger, humiliation, and fear. The stranger's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, grounding her. Your mother built a future for you, Amira, he said softly. It's time you claim it. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The calm was fragile, but it was real. For the first time, she felt like the daughter her mother had believed she could be, the one who could survive, fight, and finally thrive. Then, the sound of screeching tires cut through the moment like a knife. Red and blue lights flashed outside the windows, reflecting off the glass and bouncing across the marble floor. Police cars screeched to a halt in front of the bank. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, radios crackling with urgent commands. Amira's heart slammed against her ribs. She pressed the folder to her chest, her eyes wide with disbelief. The calm she had felt evaporated instantly, replaced by a new surge of fear. Every escape route, every plan, every safe hope now felt threatened. The stranger's face hardened. They weren't supposed to be here yet, he muttered under his breath, scanning the lobby. Something, or someone, alerted them. Amira's mind raced. She had survived storms, betrayal, and ridicule, but now even the authorities were closing in, and the safe house might not be far enough. Her pulse thundered as the world outside the office window seemed to tighten around her. And she realized, with a sickening jolt, whatever had been tracking her mother had found her first. The front doors of the Hartford Federal Bank burst open, and a squad of officers flooded the lobby, their radios crackling, eyes sharp and alert. We're looking for a young woman, Amira Brooks, one shouted, scanning the crowd with urgent precision. The whispers of customers turned into murmurs of fear and confusion. Amira froze, clutching her folder and notebook. Every instinct screamed to hide, to flee, to disappear as she had so many times before. But something inside her had shifted. Every betrayal, every humiliation, every cold, lonely night had led her to this moment. She could no longer be a ghost in the shadows. The stranger from the alley stepped between her and the approaching officers, his stance firm, authoritative. He argued with the bank's security and police, gesturing to her with controlled intensity. She is under my protection. Do not approach her. His voice cut through the tense hum of the lobby, carrying both command and urgency. Amira's heart thumped against her ribs, the adrenaline sharp in her veins. She took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the cool leather of her coat, the weight of the folder in her hands, the notebook pressing softly against her chest. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself calm, a single heartbeat of clarity amid chaos. She remembered her mother's notes, the alley, the stranger's words, the trust fund, and the countless moments of hidden kindness that had kept her alive. Every thread of her past, every painful lesson, had taught her resilience. She realized she had earned this moment. She had earned the right to step forward, to claim the truth, and to confront the world that had tried to break her. Her pulse steadied. She straightened her shoulders and looked toward the officers, the manager, the whispering customers. Her voice, when it came, was steady, firm, and filled with the confidence she had struggled to find for so long. I know the truth now, she said, her words echoing through the lobby. Every ear turned toward her. Every eye widened. The folder pressed to her chest seemed to glow with the weight of her journey, the evidence of a life carefully hidden but never lost. I know the truth now, she repeated, louder this time. Take me to her. A hush fell over the bank. The officers hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. The stranger's eyes widened slightly, but a flicker of pride softened his hardened expression. Customers leaned forward, intrigued, whispers replaced by silence. Amira's hands trembled slightly, but her gaze never wavered. She had spent years running, from betrayal, from hunger, from the cold indifference of the world. But now, she was choosing to face everything, to to claim the life her mother had prepared for her, and to confront the dangers she had been warned about. And in that single heartbeat, that quiet, defiant moment, Amira Brooks knew that whatever came next, the enemies, the hunters, the shadows of her past, she would no longer hide. She was stepping into her own story. The officer's footsteps advanced. The stranger moved closer, protective yet resolute. And Amira, standing tall in the center of the lobby, felt the weight of fear lift just enough to reveal the courage she had carried all along. But the world outside the bank was still watching, still waiting, and as the officers approached, she knew the final confrontation, with the secrets, the danger, and her mother, was about to begin. Amira Brooks was escorted through the quiet, sterile halls of Easton Ridge Hospital, her heart pounding in her chest. The folder pressed to her side felt heavier than ever, carrying decades of secrets, hope, and fear. Every step toward the hospital room brought a mix of dread and anticipation. She had dreamed of this moment for years, imagined it countless times in her mind. But now that it was real, the weight of it was almost too much to bear. The door opened, and she paused. There, lying in the hospital bed, pale and frail but unmistakably alive, was Serafina Latham, her mother. Amira's chest tightened, and tears welled in her eyes. She stepped forward, hesitated, then crossed the room in a few quick strides, dropping to her knees beside the bed. "Mom, it's me," she whispered, voice breaking. Serafina's eyes fluttered open, a weak smile breaking across her face. "Amira, my baby," she murmured. Her voice was soft, hoarse from weakness, but full of love and relief. They embraced, a long, trembling hug filled with years of pain, longing, and unshed tears. Amira could feel every heartbeat, every ounce of love and regret that had been bottled up for decades. She held her mother as if letting go would mean losing her forever. For a few quiet moments, there was no fear, no danger, no world outside that hospital room, just the warmth of reunion. Amira rested her forehead against her mother's shoulder, breathing in the faint scent of antiseptic mixed with her mother's familiar presence. She realized how much she had endured to reach this moment, and how fragile and precious life and love could be. Then Serafina's eyes opened fully, and she spoke with clarity. "Amira, I set up that account, that trust fund, everything you found, it was so you would never be powerless. I wanted to give you a chance to survive, to grow, to claim your life even if the world turned against you. Every obstacle, every hardship, you faced them with strength I knew you had." Amira's tears flowed freely, a mixture of gratitude, sorrow, and awe. She had survived betrayal, ridicule, homelessness, and fear, and now she understood. Her mother's sacrifice had been a shield, a lifeline, a declaration of love stronger than anything the world could throw at her. Serafina continued, voice trembling. "I never stopped loving you, Amira. And now you are ready to take the life I always wanted you to have." Amira held her mother's hand tightly, whispering promises she had longed to make real. The storm of her past seemed to lift slightly, leaving a fragile but undeniable sense of hope. She finally understood that survival, resilience, and love had all been guiding her to this very moment. And as she looked out the hospital window at the city beyond, the streets she had wandered, the alleys she had survived, the strangers who had shown her kindness, she felt the weight of the world shift. Her story wasn't just about pain. It was about courage, love, and the power of second chances. If you've been moved by Amira's journey, her courage, and the unyielding kindness that carried her through, don't stop here. Click on the next video to explore more stories about humanity, resilience, and the power of second chances. It might just change the way you see the world. Amira's story shows us the power of courage, love, and second chances. If her journey touched you, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. And don't miss the next story. Click to watch and discover more real tales of kindness, resilience, and hope that could change your life.